You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of singers and sound creators who are redefining what it means to make music with the voice. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Evan, and this week we've got a great example of a singer and sound creator, Mr. Daniel Hanson. He is a Canadian a cappella artist, music producer, and YouTuber, best known for his covers of both classic and modern songs, using nothing but his mouth, voice, claps, and snaps.
We were super happy to get a look inside his process, and we hope you enjoy our conversation with Daniel Hanson.
So, I guess we kind of rolled into it at this point. So, Daniel, thank you for joining us on Head Voice this week.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on. So, I kind of just want to start from the inception, when you were born. Tell us a little bit about where you were, how you were raised, and how music came about.
So, I was born on April 6, 1991 in Mississauga, which is a really large city in Canada, in Ontario, Canada. It's near Toronto. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the largest cities in North America, if not the largest. It's definitely the largest in Canada, from what I know.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's not really city-ish. It's more like a whole bunch of suburbs stuck together. Went to a French immersion school, and my dad had a background in music. He was a pianist, where he would play for his church all the time. And my mom listened to a lot of the music that inspired me back then. She listened to Michael Jackson, Phil Collins. A lot of the stuff you hear me covering from the classics are from that time growing up, as far as, in terms of stuff my mom would listen to. There's a picture of me trying to get at the sound system, and I think like they'd put the piano bench in front of the sound system to prevent me from getting to it because I kept messing with it. And there's a picture of me like knocking it over or something. Yeah, so that's like toddler years, but my earliest memories are around my dad singing the bass notes to songs that I would listen to. So like songs would be playing and he would sing like the root note of each chord as the chord progression would move through. And that really helped shape my sort of ability to perceive the underlying structure of music I was hearing really early on. So I remember I would be walking to school and I would hear the Power Rangers song playing in my head, and I could sort of segment out the main guitar line. And I remember going back home in the bath trying to sing it to my mom, thinking it was so cool. And she just wasn't that impressed, but was supportive as a mom would be. But yeah, so early on, I was kind of just off to a start with that. I think largely due to my dad singing around me and playing the piano. And there's a lot of musical. I don't know if we can call it genetic, but on my dad's side of the family, music is just super, super, it comes super naturally to a lot of people on that side of the family. It's a super big family. My dad has a Jamaican background. He was born and raised in England, but his parents are Jamaican. And there are a whole bunch of singers and piano players, a lot of musicians on that side. My mom always dreamed of being a singer as well. So yeah, there was that, and just a lot of awesome R&B and things that were influencing me early on. And I don't know how far you want me to go into like how my musical development happened, because I know you were just mentioning the inception. Do you want me to go further along as to how it progressed?
Yeah, I mean, like you can, obviously, like piano and singing and drumming are big elements of your videos that you're doing now.
Yeah.
So where did those sort of?
Piano was sitting around in the living room. Like I would always walk up to it, bang on it, and mess around. But it wasn't until I think I was about 8 or so, where I think I was maybe 7 or 8, my mom put me in piano lessons. And yeah, I found it sort of cool, but what tended to happen, it was about 2 years of piano lessons and a little bit of vocal training. I would be given assignments where I was supposed to learn to play a certain song, and I pretty much would never do the homework. And I would go back to my teacher, and I would just sort of like wing it every time to try to make it look like I practiced when I didn't. So
Mhm.
I progressed very, very slowly. In 2 years, I made it up like 2 levels, and but I was absorbing certain skills. Like they were teaching me to play scales and um, just all the basics of how to sort of integrate two hands on the piano and stuff. And what started to happen with that was I would play, say, a part on my left hand that resembled something I recognized. When it really clicked, there was a part I would play that resembled Hit the Road Jack. You know this song?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So on the left hand, it went dum, 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 dum. And on the right hand, it was something totally different than Hit the Road Jack, but I'd seen the connection. And I realized they were both in the C minor scale. And then it dawned on me that, wait, if this song works and it's in C minor scale with the same left hand part and Hit the Road Jack works, then I should be able to play any notes in any arrangement with my right hand and play the same left hand part and it should work. And that was just like the birth of improvisation. All of a sudden I could just do whatever I wanted and it sounded good.
Mhm.
So that opened up this whole new dimension for me. And I started doing that all the time. And I would go to class and I'd try to do it and she would tell me not to, and then I could, do that another time or something. And I just grew kind of disinterested in the formal lessons. So I left the lessons. I'd done a little bit of choir work here and there, and I dreamed of being a singer actually when I was even younger and into my early teens because of Michael Jackson and the
Mhm.
Hanson brothers also inspired me. Um, but
Not because of your last name.
no, but it seemed like it was destiny, Um,
It must have helped,
yeah, it
Alex, a
definitely
little.
did. I was like, I can do it too. So So I yeah, that was so powerful for me because that gave me an outlet to learn to discover new structures on the piano that um I just didn't have that outlet before. So that's exactly how I continue to play to this day, just kind of intuitively selecting structures based on what I know and what I've acquired and what I enjoy the sound of, which is, essentially how any improvisational musician plays. But that was the beginning of that. Um,
You mentioned some of your videos that you started doing some like electronic production work,
yeah,
like on the computer, etc. In your early teens, maybe.
yeah.
So kind of what brought you from that to what you're currently pursuing now, being a cappella for the time being.
The electronic production started. I was about 14. My brother introduced me to FL Studio, which is um, it's a DAW, a digital audio workstation program, and I was just in love with it. I'd make all kinds of stuff. I'd remake songs that I loved, and slowly learned it. Slowly learned to do original songs with it, and
Hmm.
essentially, I started becoming obsessed with the idea of getting the elaborate ideas I would hear in my head into the electronic compositions. And
Hmm.
it was challenging because I would hear such sort of intricate structures and multi-layered concepts that I didn't know how I could possibly get them out. So I started singing them essentially and
Hmm.
trying to sort of match my vocal flow to what I was experiencing in my head. And um that led to and that was sort of the beatboxing phase and all these things. So I was learning to kind of sing that scat style that you hear me do with the beatboxing and everything that sort of lends well to a cappella singing. And my hands started hurting when I was deep into my electronic production. My hands started hurting, and I don't quite know what it was. They still hurt to this day. It came out of nowhere. It's gotten a lot better, but it was so bad at the time that I couldn't use a computer. I couldn't use my phone. I couldn't do anything. Um, I couldn't work. It was just really not fun. And I was so used to getting my sense of like progression from music, and I couldn't do it anymore. So I was just kind of
Hmm.
lost. And at a certain point, like months in, I was like, I can't do this. So I built a contraption where it's like I took a keyboard, like a computer keyboard, and I took out all the keys except for like 15 different keys, and I created macro commands on key, put it on the
Mhm.
ground, and then I created a contraption where I had a trackball mouse that would sit, and I would control it with my chin, and I'd hit the commands with my feet, and then I started layering my voice using my microphone instead of programming
Mm.
melodies. So I just thought if
Mhm.
I can't use the computer, I could still use my voice. I could still sort of get by. So I started layering my voice, and that's what led to me sort of developing that skill. And
Yeah.
as my hands started getting a little bit better, I started being able to incorporate more of the production side of things into the process. And I was at the same time really trying to get serious about how I could make a living as a musician. And I was learning about the importance of niching, like picking a very defined subgenre and
Mhm.
Mhm.
doing something that highlighted your skills, something that was something you could produce relatively rapidly. The whole a cappella concept, and also looking online, seeing that there seemed to be an opening for what I believed I had to offer. I didn't see a lot of people sort of doing it the way that I felt like I would probably in like idealize doing it. So
Yeah.
um at one point I just said, okay, you know, take advantage of this. So I was doing pop music while incorporating my a cappella singing style as well as some purely a cappella songs. And yeah, it just went on from there. I posted a video, my first YouTube video, as just an attempt to sort of get in the flow of posting a little something here and there. And people liked it, so I posted a cover. People liked it and they wanted more in terms of a longer piece because I only did half the cover. So I just started posting regular covers and I was trying to commit to a weekly schedule, and it just all sort of snowballed from there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that the thing with the trackpad and the keyboard sounds harrowing, but also like a superhero origin story. Like you used what you could, and that really interests me that that acapella kind of and that whole thing starting for you was kind of born out of necessity more so than like I like whatever. Although you do have a big influence of you mentioned Bobby McFerrin and stuff. So I'm just curious of like what your exposure point was to acapella music because when we saw your videos initially, I just like saw this random kid Daniel Hanson posting stuff, and I was like, sometimes you see stuff and it's bad, but I often just click out of curiosity, and like it obviously wasn't, and but you definitely feel like you've come from your own world and your
Mhm.
own way that you make stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, so just like what was that entrance point to acapella for you?
Yeah, so uh I mean there was Bobby McFerrin for years, years
Hmm.
Mhm.
before I even considered exactly doing it myself like professionally. But so Bobby McFerrin really inspired that idea of that the very specific way I sing. And I
Yeah.
wasn't really seeing other people singing that way in the sort of contemporary a cappella world. He seems to have
Mhm.
his own kind of thing there. I, I mean, there's sort of those kinds of things, but his very specific style hugely influenced the way I sing. I'm sure you can tell. But as far as like really coming into seeing, what was happening in the community and how I may have something to offer. First thing I ever saw actually in that regard, which, you know, I don't know if we call this contemporary a cappella, but I saw Mike Tompkins in 2010.
Mm.
I saw Mike Tompkins in
Another
20.
Canadian.
I didn't know he was Canadian. That's funny.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in 2010, I saw him with his Tao Cruz Dynamite cover, and
Mhm.
I thought it was cool. Also found it astonishing how much attention it was getting, because to me, like and no disrespect to Mike Tompkins, but because what he does is solid and he's a great producer, but like it seemed very simple to achieve in my eyes, that you could just simply kind of layer each part with your voice and put the drums there
Mhm.
but use a beatbox sound instead, and you're just sort of replacing the sounds. His covers are usually verbatim covers. He doesn't necessarily do
Yeah.
anything new or creative with them most of the time. Sometimes he does. um So I saw that, and that sort of first triggered my awareness of what might be possible with that. And then,
Mm-hmm.
as I started sort of exploring it myself, when I ran into my hand problem, I was taking a look at the scene, and I found Peter Hollens. My friend introduced me to Peter Hollens, and
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
when I saw that, I was like, okay, this guy's really good. Like this is interesting because he was doing creative takes on what was there, and I was looking around at different a cappella artists, different groups, and I found Home Free. I don't know if you guys know Home Free.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed with them. So, like, I was just I was just not seeing a whole lot of the very creative, like, totally reworking a song in your own
Yeah.
style. It was more like, let's cover a song the way it is, which is, to me, it's a little bit more like contemporary piano playing or instrumentation or something where you get the sheet music and you play the song,
Right.
which is its own art form within itself. But that's where I was starting to see that there wasn't a huge uh, culture that I was aware of, that I was seeing, where people would rewrite the entire piece in a totally new kind of arrangement, and that's something that
Mm-hmm.
came very
Mm-hmm.
naturally to me because of my whole all my experimentation. I'm always singing on top of songs that I hear and creating new melodies within them, and so it's actually
Yeah.
easier. It's more gratifying to me to translate the song into a new style than it is for me to do it verbatim. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's essentially what happened. I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but
Yeah, definitely. The song that I saw from you first was you did September, and it was very, like kind of what you're talking about, that kind of transformative cover. And what really stuck out to me is like in watching that, and then the original series that you've been doing, the Acapella in 30 series. I think that the standout thing that kind of is part of that definition of your style from an outsider's standpoint is kind of it feels like, I think you've mentioned that your strength is kind of in composition, but it feels like very like counterpointy in a very like pleasing way. Of it's not just like stacked first,
yeah,
third,
yeah,
fifth. Like it's like lines that kind of go between each other without
yeah,
being busy, which is often a thing that happens in acapella where people want to put every beautiful like pretty thing together and then it's just like ah.
yeah, yeah,
But like
yeah.
yours really like glue together in that way. That even in that the series that you do in like half an hour, that those always kind of seem to be considered. So like when you're putting those together, are you thinking theory at all, or is it just kind of like a flow state and it's like just purely happening in that way?
So it's yeah. I'm not thinking well. I definitely use logical, sort of theoretical concepts in terms of when I like analyze music, or if I want to geek out about music to my friend, like if I want to describe a structure I'm seeing, I use a lot of those theoretical terms
Mm-hmm.
to describe what I'm looking at. But my whole perspective on, and I'm going to sidetrack a bit, I'll come back to that. My whole perspective on theory versus flow and intuition is that music comes first. Music came first. We use theory as a way to describe what music is.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that language comes first, and then the written language comes after the fact, or gravity exists, or the world, the laws of the universe are in place, but we use science as a way to describe what's happening, and so that we can do something with it. So, um, first and foremost for me is the intuition and the feeling, and then I can describe what's happening using theory. But it's not necessary for me. But theory can also help teach me new concepts that I can apply and use intuitively as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, when I'm making these acapella and 30s in that series, first of all, it's important for me to be straight about the fact that I'm not coming up with everything in 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I always go in with a base concept. Usually, I'll have an idea for a bass line and lyrics, so that I'm not wasting time getting started, and so that I'm not wasting time writing lyrics. I'm just like firing at whatever I can. Most of the in between is all improv. And yeah, so what I'll do is I'll get the idea layered down, and I might be working up other ideas in my head in that phase, but I'll get it recorded and get it looping, and then I'll sit and I won't proceed until I have another solid, clear idea in my mind. So I'll simply sit and feel it out, and I'll feel the structure of the rhythm. There might be clear kind of edges to the bass line that could be complemented by something in a very sort of satisfying way, or a lot of the time I'll just follow the trajectory of the bass line with a harmony, and that'll give me more ideas. I might follow that trajectory and then get an idea for a tail on the end that doesn't follow the same trajectory, and things like this. So a lot of it is getting into a state where I'm just sort of allowing myself to ride as though I was jamming with another musician live, and seeing what comes out. And as soon as I have something that sort of in the right, a lot of the time it's in my head, a lot of the time it's also out loud simultaneously, back and forth. So as soon as I find something that's sort of the right flow, I'll start singing, and I'll sing over and over again for a bit before I then go and record the idea. So I have to be clear about the idea that I'm coming to, and that it fits as effectively as I feel is, at least to my own standard, for what I can do, and like when I'm under pressure like that. And then I'll put it down, and if the core structure is right, the bass line and the rhythm and everything about it I agree with intuitively, and then the next idea I agree with intuitively, those are going to start to inspire other ideas that complement. And I'm going to know if I'm, after a while, and I've gone through that whole thing where you add way too many ideas and it's just crowded, and it doesn't make sense. Like I did all that, and I still, it still happens, but I have a general sense now for when there's enough there, because people are satisfied with relatively low amounts of information, as long as they're all properly sort of complementing each other.
Yeah.
And it can also help. It can be more satisfying because you can hear every element rather than having things become obscured in the background.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like it's all just sort of just riding off of something that originally is gratifying to me, satisfying to me. So having that bass line, or that core idea that I completely agree with, is necessary, and then having the melody and the lyrics that I know will ultimately be able to sit on that gives me kind of the confidence to just fill in between, and just feel it out using the same approach, just kind of feeling out the idea. Yeah.
This is less of a question. In fact, it's not a question at all, but just as a person who is very into loop stations and looping artists, like, I feel like you'd make some dope looping videos, like on a loop station. Should
I
that
second
ever
that.
be something that you want to do?
Yeah, I've been told that a lot since getting online, and I agree. I love the idea. I think it's a lot of fun, and I feel like if I ever wanted to do live shows, a loop station would be really, really useful for that.
Yes.
It's funny, just because this whole thing is so new to me, just making this kind of music all the time, that, like, I like looping, but as far as priorities go, my mind automatically goes to, I'd rather put the money towards a better microphone, because this microphone is not, this is not really what anybody would recommend for what I'm doing, or like,
I was gonna ask, when you were kind of talking about how you build songs and you're thinking about the elements like interweaving, and that's something that's like a priority for you when you're making songs. I was also curious about the tonal elements, which you've talked about in some of your videos too, how
mm,
you want to make sure that whatever you're singing, you're executing the right tone. So I'm curious
yeah,
if you can like talk about that a little bit more, and what exactly you mean by that, and how you try to get there when you're building
that's a
parts out.
very that's a very good question. I think it's an important thing. So we as singers, we can create all kinds of different tones. Whether, like, I can sing a high note but have it be low enough that I use my chest voice. I can still use my chest voice, and create a very different kind of tonal texture, like a timbre, than if I sang it with the head voice. Or, like, I can sing something very breathy versus much more clear,
Mm-hmm.
and, like, you can have more nasal, or you can have more of this kind of thing. So
Mhm.
Mhm.
moving across those different tonal textures gives you a whole palette of different kinds of ways to articulate and express dynamically. Um,
Mhm.
so when I'm singing, I might do 10 takes and realize that a certain one had a certain tonal texture that I prefer, or I might do a couple takes and listen to it and be like, no, no, that's not the tone I need. I need to make it more. I wish I could give you an example, but I could sing something like da da ga da ga da da ga da ga da, or I could sing da da ga da ga da da ga da ga da, and it's a totally different type of effect.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so that's the kind of thing. It's like being very clear. Over time, I started to get a really strong feel for how to just like use these different tones, as many
Yeah.
singers do, and I got intentional about them in my production because it's the way I can get tonal diversity in a way that mimics, the tonal diversity you go for when making electronic music. So, you know,
Yeah.
it would probably be effective for me to do maybe a video explaining a little bit more about this, but because there are songs that just would of mine that really, really would not feel or sound the same if I wasn't layering different tones um, very intentionally, and it might
Mhm.
Mhm.
it might come a lot from my electronic background because I know when something needs a little bit more like tinniness in the top end or something, or like when I have a whole bunch of chords. If you sing them all with a very soft tone versus a very breathy tone, you're gonna get a totally different kind of effect from
Mhm.
it. So that's sort of what I mean by focusing on tones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the result of that is just, as we've kind of been talking about, a very unique sound, and I feel like that coupled with your very unique story of how you like got into doing this in the first place lends to ultimately just this being a very unique concept that you're pursuing. I feel like in the way of the style of what you're doing and your intention behind it. And so earlier we were talking about how your family has been supportive, but it kind of blows my mind that you kind of just started this year, basically like doing this specific thing. And this wasn't, you didn't do collegiate acapella. It's a very, this is your own thing. And so I think to do what you're doing, you really have to be a self starter, and you have to be driven, and you have to want to work hard, which you clearly are doing. Can you kind of just talk about your mentality as a creator and now somebody pursuing music like full time as a career, and like what's keeping you going?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Mhm.
As far as like my drive, I spent many years like not being nearly as driven. Like I would make music
Mhm.
for bursts at a time, and then there would be there'd be months where I wouldn't make any music, and this is back in my electronic days. And
Mhm.
I over the years, it just became clearer and clearer to me. If you're gonna actually do this for a living, you got to be super, 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 super real with yourself because most people in the world don't succeed with these kinds of things. And
Mhm.
I was starting to get older. I'm 27, and it's like I'm not a kid anymore, and I gotta either do it 100% or not. So that started hitting me when I
Mhm.
was like, all right, well, what is this going to consist of? It's going to consist of your time. It's going to consist of you, therefore, replacing things you tend to do with your music as much as possible. And that was a process. That wasn't all at once. That was like I got better and better and better at disciplining myself. And then when stressful situations in life would come, they would throw me off and I'd get better at getting back on and things like this. And
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
yeah, a real turning point for me was first of all starting to understand what business was and that I knew to do this, it was only going to happen as a result of cyclic, sort of repetition and engagement and learning of skills and keep, just
Yeah.
go, go, go. It works. Like if you can withstand anything for a few years, in terms of something that develops you, you're going to see very substantial results from it in one dimension or another, and you're going to learn from it. So with everything I'd learned and all this whole mentality, it was like you gotta make another song and make another video. I was so not about making songs that quickly. I used to spend 30 sessions on a song back in my electronic days. Now it's like now it's like
Mhm.
spend 2 nights. It's not even properly mixed and like get a video together. I don't know what I'm doing in Adobe Premiere. Just edit this thing and I don't know how to perform on camera. It was super awkward trying to learn how to perform on camera because I'm just like looking at a inanimate object and dancing around and singing. But I knew I just had to find my groove and I had to adhere to that commitment. So that commitment and adhering to it made it increasingly unacceptable to not adhere to that commitment. So, increasingly unacceptable to not adhere to that commitment. So, I, yeah, so all of that is what propels me forward, and the fact that I know I will be on top of the world, I cannot even imagine what it would be like to make an entire living from my music and be sustained on what I love and to live a life that consists of me sharing something completely authentic to myself that has been part of my life and my mind and my whole energy since for as long as I can remember, for that to be the thing that allows me to live and propels my life is so worth sacrificing whatever it takes now because I know I'll thank myself and I know I will not be happy with myself if I don't. So so
Mhm.
that's it. It's like I don't have much of a choice and I have this opportunity. A lot of people don't have this opportunity. I'm living with
Yeah.
my family still, and it's like they always like wanted to be supportive of my music and my mom was always supportive just as a mom. My dad was supportive in terms of wanting me to make a living, meaning it was hard for him to get
Mhm.
behind the music thing. Um but he started to see it and I started doing covers. I started doing songs that they could relate to. I was singing instead of making electronic sounds. I was doing classic covers of songs that they grew up with and they were connecting with it. And all of a sudden the whole
Mhm.
household started being in total support. It's like instead of Daniel, you shouldn't be up all night, or whatever, it's like let Daniel do what he's got to do, because it's working. So um
Mhm.
so yeah, it's like I have this
I
amazing
think you
opportunity.
said it all.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I guess so.
I feel newly inspired by
Yeah,
that.
yeah, totally.
I didn't wanna let you stop
Mhm.
talking, so I was like, "Wow, he's really on a roll right now," and I feel so
That-
inspired. I just wanna commend you for just, like, being so passionate about something and being so committed to you and doing the thing that you wanna do.
Mhm.
That's really, like, nice for us to hear as musicians who are trying to do music in some form or
Yeah,
other, so
yeah.
it's really reaffirming to hear someone like you putting your everything towards this one goal,
I
which is
appreciate
awesome.
that.
Um, yeah, of course. So we're actually nearing the end of our episode today, but we have 2 questions that we like to ask our guests, and I'll just ask the first one. So the first one is what in the acapella scene, or I guess in your case, in the general music scene, is exciting you? So like what trends or things happening are you inspired by?
Um,
Probably a lot of things.
well, that's really an interesting question. To tell you the truth, the only thing there are two things I'd say that I could say that I'm seeing that inspire me. One is the arrangements by Tom Anderson. He's the one who does most of the arrangements for Peter Hollens.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I didn't realize it was like that. For a while, I thought Peter Hollens was making the arrangements, but it's mostly Tom Anderson. Um, I am inspired by what I'm hearing there because it those are elaborate compositions that are really well constructed a lot of the time, and
Mhm.
that's what I want to hear. I heard Peter Hollens' "Drummer Boy" cover with Mike Tompkins. I don't know if
Mhm.
you guys heard that.
I
Did you
think
hear that
so.
one?
Maybe.
So I was super impressed with that, and like so whenever I hear something like that, it excites me to an extent because at the end of the day, to be completely honest, a cappella music is not like uniquely inspiring to me by any stretch.
Mhm.
Um, it's just something that my skills lend well to. So it doesn't matter if it's a cappella or classical or hip hop or electronic. It's like I'm looking for that particular quality of intentional melodic texture, so and phrasing. So when I hear that in the acapella scene and done in a really effective way, that's inspiring to me. But inspiring in the same way that any style of music could be. But what's uniquely inspiring in the acapella scene, which I don't know if we want to call the acapella scene, is what Bobby McFerrin does, and
Mhm.
that's this he just gets in the pure flow right on stage. He just completely commits to the flow, and his melodic arrangement is so intelligent and alive and advanced, and like I was inspired by him in ways that had nothing to do with a cappella music. It was just so melodically rich and
Mhm.
advanced and educational for me. It was so nourishing to listen to. I saw him live a couple times. Once I actually got to sit on stage with him.
What?
Um,
That's
yeah,
cool.
so yeah, he does this thing where he invites people to come and duet with him. And I was maybe, I don't know how old I was, like 20 or something. I hadn't really established myself in my ability to flow now, but I went on there and I beatboxed a little bit, and it was so cool. I was starstruck. I didn't know what to do with it. It was just like, I was just lost in there, but it was cool to say that I did that. But yeah, so elaborate composition that I see. I think Home Free does some really cool stuff with that. Pentatonics does some cool stuff with that. Tom Anderson is probably my favorite at the moment from what I've heard. And Bobby McFerrin by a long shot. Doesn't matter if it's a cappella or not. He's just one of my all time. He's one of my idols as far as just musicianship goes in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I will stop the recommending things to you, Train, but Sam Robson, I don't know if you've checked him out yet,
Yes.
but like,
I don't
okay,
ring. It doesn't ring
you
a bell.
you will like Sam Robson. He's like the only guy on YouTube who I feel like does something like relatively close to you, and it's not the same, but like you're gonna like it. Anyway,
Okay,
so
cool.
our final question is, what is on the plate for you? Obviously, you had a big announcement recently, but
Yeah.
what plans do you have going forward? Collaborations? Where do you want to go?
Okay. Yeah, I'm super, super, super excited. Like, I love that I was able to step away from what I was doing in a way where I knew I needed to go further with what I was doing, and everyone was so supportive.
Hmm.
I know they could feel that I meant it, and like, yeah, I was just so like, I was relieved. I'd been in this like on this treadmill for 6 months, and now it was
Uh-huh.
like, all right, what can we do from here? Because there's so many opportunities. So, um, collaborations. So I don't know if you're familiar with an artist named AU5. He's an electronic producer. He's very he's very well established in the electronic scene. Got a big following,
Uh-huh.
and he's just like he's a genius. Technically speaking, this guy is like one of the most innovative electronic artists I've ever heard, and he's an amazing musician. And he and I became friends through my electronic days, and he's still super supportive of what I'm doing now. And he asked me to sing on one of his songs on his new album,
Ooh.
upcoming,
Cool.
which is super exciting. Yeah, and that stretches outside of a cappella, but the beauty there is that he is a um his audience largely consists of other like kind of fledgling electronic artists.
Hmm.
So me being on one of his songs introduces me to a whole new dimension of people that I can work with. So that's super
Mhm.
super exciting. Um Collaborations. I don't know if you guys have heard of Scott and Resijo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But yeah, we're
Ricey
gonna do
Joe,
we're
I don't
gonna do
really, we don't
We're not
know.
sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I really should have asked him about that before this, but yeah, yeah, we're gonna be doing something together, which is really exciting.
Very cool.
They do a lot of Disney stuff. I haven't told them yet, but I have a super cool idea for a whole new world by Aladdin that I'd love to explore with them.
Cool.
They do mashups, so I'm gonna see if I can find another song that I can kind of mash up with it. I want to do the whole thing. I want to just like go 100% with it, and then send it to them, and then see if they want. Like they'll just replace some vocals and stuff, but they're down with me doing a bunch of the arrangement and such. So that's super 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 cool. That'll bring a whole
Hmm.
new audience forward, and a new style, kind of to what they're doing and what I'm doing. I've never done that yet, so that's awesome. Um, as far as what's in store for me beyond that, there are so many things I need to just do that I haven't done. Like I need to build a website. I'm gonna put all the covers I've done to date, or almost all of them, I'm gonna put them on an album, I decided. And
Nice.
and I wanted to use that as a sort of platform to learn how to sell an album, how to promote an album, see how that goes. So yeah, I just got everything up on iTunes and Spotify and such. So that's a first for me. So that's pretty cool. Um so yeah, that's what's up with me right now. Just lots of collaborating opportunities. I want to get into potentially session singing. Like I'm looking at all the different potential revenue streams that I could potentially take advantage of. I want to just start making action steps toward all of them. I just want to look at every opportunity I have from my new position and just
Mhm.
be like, okay, well, how could I move in the most effective direction possible? And I think the two most important things for me now are quality for my own creative satisfaction and income. If I can do those two
Yeah.
things, if I can move in those two directions, then I will I think I'll feel like I'm moving towards the next step of my career kind of thing in
Yeah.
in a clear direction. So a lot of it's scattered right now, but
Yeah.
I'm putting all my ideas together and
Well,
figuring
I
out where to
definitely
go.
think you're setting yourself up for all
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
props to you.
Yeah. We
Thank you.
typically end with this question of like, what's on your plate? But you have a
The
full
world on your
banquet
plate.
platter, and like there's lots of things going.
And dessert.
Yeah, so I think those things will come. Like Kayla was
Thank
saying,
you.
it's a super inspiring thing that you're doing. So
I appreciate it.
thank you so much for joining us, Daniel, this week. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and we hope that you join us next week for a new episode of Headphones.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you missed last week, this is the outro, and you're currently listening to Daniel's version of September off of his newly released album.
Yeah, September is the first thing that we both heard from him, I think, and I think it really represents the way that he makes music, and when you get like his whole context and backstory, I think it really like shows where that whole progression comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And also when he was talking about how he used this contraption to make a keyboard that he controlled with his feet, I was like, what? That's so awesome, so cool.
Yeah, I think that there's so much with him that we only scratched the surface. And if you felt that way as well, Daniel's got some really comprehensive Q&A style type videos on his channel, which you definitely should check out. He's got a bunch of videos up there, stuff on Instagram, Facebook, on Spotify now, and we'll link some of our favorites in the show notes. And thank you for making it to the end. We've got a great episode for you next week, something a little bit different, something very fun. And if you want something else fun, head on over to those places that I mentioned. Leave us a review, follow us on Spotify, and we will see you next week.
So much fun.
Now December, found the love if we shared in September. Only blue, dark and love. Remember, yeah, the true love we share today. Yeah, yeah. What?